Thank you to the presenters and the organizers of this conference. Happy to be here. This is Green Goes with Anything, Decreasing Environmental Impact at Digital Libraries of Virginia Tech. As mentioned, Alex, who is the lead author on this with myself, she's unable to be here due to complications with travel, but she's following along on the webcast, so hopefully she'll be able to answer any questions as they come up at the end that I can't answer myself. Let's see. As digital library practitioners, we are investigating ways to guide digital curation practices more broadly across Virginia Tech University libraries while prioritizing considerations for environmental sustainability. In doing so, we explore university and professional standards and ethics using the 2019 article Towards Environmentally Sustainable Digital Preservation as a guide to focus on immediate areas that we can address in our digital library workflows. We investigated our workflows for appraisal, digitization, fixity checking, and storage choices to identify areas of improvement that find a balance between best practices and environmental sustainability. In this, we seek to understand the environmental impact of our university libraries' digital preservation choices on the community in which we live. So our literature review started with examining early sustainability efforts among libraries and archives. Early green efforts were seen mainly in building design, addressing cost-effective climate management for collection care. And the swift introduction of digital technology to the library has removed collection managers from the physical impact of that day-to-day work. But we found in the Pendergrass article from 2019, as mentioned, it provided a great framework to shift to environmentally sustainable goals. And new research in this space continues to stress the immediate need for more sustainable practices in collection management. We also looked at mission statements and shared value statements from professional organizations as valuable resources. The Society of American Archivists makes a clear case for green-focused practices, charging members to, quote, devise environmentally sustainable techniques for preserving collections and serving communities, unquote. There is understanding of the balance of the ever-present dialogue with environmental considerations, and another quote, developing acquisition, processing, storage, and service models must necessarily involve an ongoing awareness of the impact of archival work on the environment, unquote. DPSC has listed sustainability as a core value as well, and the National Archives and Records Administration of the U.S. has created a climate action plan. Among the plan's 5 action items is, quote, the strengthening of NARA's climate resilience by leveraging cloud-based solutions, unquote. So benefits outlined include the safeguarding against weather events, a more secure data supply chain, and notably that a move to cloud systems, quote, may ultimately reduce greenhouse gas emissions due to consolidated cooling and controlling of the data centers, unquote. This is presented mainly as a hypothetical in this NARA plan, not offering evidence for greenhouse gas reduction other than demonstrating that a shift from in-person to virtual reading room during the pandemic practices contributed to less emissions. We also considered our library-wide sustainability goals and as well as the institutional goals from Virginia Tech. Being a large land-grant institution in the middle of coal country in Southwest Virginia, we, as a university, have a responsibility to engage with our history of industrial energy extraction and build better sustainability strategies into each aspect of our university. The university's own division of campus planning, infrastructure, and facilities, Office of Energy Management, has developed a 5-year energy action plan that ended in 2020, supported the current iteration of the Virginia Tech Climate Action Commitment, which aims to set university on a path to carbon neutrality by 2030, while also being a campus building consuming similar energy to other facilities on campus. The university library is unique in its management of multiple stores of data in our institutional repositories, digital libraries, special collections, university archives, and data repository. It is this history and context in mind that we explore the current environmental impact of our digital library choices and recommendations for decreasing this impact through changes in our workflows. The next few slides explain a bit about our existing digital collections infrastructure and the outline for our methodology for our evaluation. Let's digitalize it, right? So newly created digital collections at V2UL, or Virginia Tech University Libraries, are mediated by a team of stakeholders from across library departments who review project proposals. Once approved, projects move to the Digital Imaging Lab to create preservation digital objects to serve as a surrogate for the original object. By following the federal agency's Digital Guidelines Initiative, FADGI guidelines, the Digital Imaging Lab strives to achieve consistent, repeatable, measurable digital files in an efficient and scalable manner. The latest approved revision of FADGI guideline does not explicitly address environmental sustainability in the creation of preservation standards. On the limitations of its guideline, the initiative defers that its quality standards are, quote, appropriate for most cultural heritage imaging projects and takes into consideration the competing requirements of quality, speed of production, and cost, unquote. The Digital Imaging Lab has a production server that is backed up nightly, and upon completion, they transfer the working files to the appropriate department for either metadata cleanup or deposit into the digital library platform at the university. With the variety of projects, some which may be hosted by Virginia Tech, some which may be hosted and managed by Virginia Tech or neither, and some that may not, there's a likelihood of redundancy in the transfer of these objects. So we're considering, well, obviously more copies in more places is a tenet of digital preservation, but where do diminishing returns in the realms of security and preservation cross into harmful environmental practices? So like the Sith Lord, what we really want is unlimited power. In our case, we want energy, or in the non-evil sense, to run all the preservation activities we can to ensure access. All preservation activities are constantly consuming power and ongoing storage for multiple copies, fixity and fixity frequency, ingest and restoration, migration, etc. However, knowing that we need energy to perform these activities means we need to use it carefully, Yoda style. The 2017 NDSA Fixity survey showed that 84.1% of respondents indicated that they run Fixity at some point, then jumping to 98% of respondents in the 2021 Fixity survey. It's interesting to note that neither NDSA nor the DPC provide a single best practice for the frequency of Fixity, but we all agree that Fixity is absolutely necessary for ingest and migration. Without a best practice, there are many combinations of Fixity frequency that can be tailored to individual needs and resources. So broadly, broadly speaking, there are three types of Fixity frequency that are currently used by various organizations. Frequent or continuous Fixity provides faster repair and faster notifications. It's highly energy consumptive, and it's cost prohibitive, particularly if calculations are performed in the cloud. In contrast, minimal Fixity, for example, checking only on migration from one location to another, is much slower to notify and repair, but it is much less energy consuming and at a lower cost. Both of these methods open and read the entire file to look for issues. Third method is continuous checking in a canonical Fixity store. This is self-healing process through multiple copies that uses less energy and bandwidth for individual checks because it does not need to open and read every file. However, this method requires cost and time and maintenance to keep all the caches active and updated. Just to give a little context to the point of Fixity checks at Virginia Tech, this is a simple diagram showing the standard migration from location to location. Locations are in rectangles, and the reason and or Fixity and or frequency at that stage is in the gray circles. This only shows migration and doesn't include other preservation activities that are ongoing at Virginia Tech. For our investigation into the energy cost of Fixity checking, at our university, we primarily drew from two different studies of similar previous work. The first study tested different types of Fixity and found that MD4 and MD5 are the less energy consumptive hash algorithms. They also tested various file sizes and found that, quote, consumption increases with the size of the file, and noted in the two examples on the slide. Another concept they introduced was energy consumption is dependent on the energy source, with coal being the most impactful, and on the time of day the fixity is run, such as during peak hours or versus the middle of the night. Second study is a little further removed from our goal in the project, but they examined the quality and energy efficiency and hashing algorithms of mobile devices and found a 29% difference in battery life between choosing the highest and least energy consuming hash. This is important to note that there is a significant energy difference in using various forms of fixity checking. Moving on to storage, we examine the number of copies we maintain because the number of copies directly affects the number of times fixity is calculated. It's been well established that distributed digital preservation storage with administrative diversity and multiple copies is a best practice for preservation storage, and DSA currently indicates that a minimum of 3 copies is ideal, and LOX maintains 5, previously 7 copies. A third study we draw from was conducted by Bethany Scott at the University of Houston Libraries, who inventoried all of the hardware components of their access and preservation infrastructure to measure electricity usage. She concluded that focusing on ZFS fixity checking and decreasing file format resolutions would be the best way to optimize their local hardware to decrease environmental impact. The previously discussed studies indicate that the larger files consume more energy, so we know that file size affects both storage and fixity. So as a university, we rely on Amazon World Service, on AWS as a primary storage source. They do claim a 72% reduction of carbon emissions from their data centers compared to other enterprise data centers. But in another study attempting to test these claims, it was very difficult to measure the distribution of emissions over time due to limited lifespan of a given server. It's also interesting to note that other studies have claimed that cloud computing and storage is significantly more energy consuming than saving to disk, but that any security-driven disk server will consume more energy than an energy-saving disk server. This paper is scoped to archival appraisal, digital workflows, fixity frequency, and storage options. We are not exploring the energy consumption of migrations, data transfers, our own university hardware energy consumption, and we're not examining other cloud computing actions that occur, although there is a significant interest in green computing. We're using estimates to determine a broad sense of approximate impact that is not based on hard numbers and relies on others' research. Our paper is highly qualitative and meant to provide direction for exploring changes in our digital library practices. Isolating our research to the defined scope may alter the ultimate environmental impact of our practices, but still provide insight on what we may be able to modify in the short term. So some results that cover the findings of our evaluation. So in the realm of appraisal and digitization, using the plainly stated language of the Pendergrass 2019 article to reduce digital content overall, appraisal and digitization practices are areas which should be scrutinized. A well-defined collecting policy will help control the scope and prioritize the collecting efforts. It may be beneficial to directly name environmental considerations in a further revision of our collecting policy. Clarity in how collections are prioritized internally for digitization is another area to address. The existing Advisory Council for Digital Collections at our university library could be a logical check on unsustainable digital projects that are in the pipeline. This scrutiny could also exist within submitting library departments prior to review by the Advisory Council. These departments should clarify how collections are prioritized internally as well. Selection decisions may be made around privacy, access restrictions, copyrights, uniqueness, which are common, as well as time and effort required to digitize. But it may also be beneficial to create a list of collections that specifically will not be digitized. Among digitization practices, organizations should identify areas where changes can be made. In some cases, this will mean going against industry standards of resolution or bit depth. While the biggest results may come from a reevaluation of standards contributing to file size, simple cleanup to digitized materials can play a role in sustainability goals. This could mean addressing duplicate or blank pages, trimming dead air, or commercial content from digitized sources prior to repository ingest. Our fixity results will be referring to several measurements in this table, so it's really only included here for reference, but we can go back to it if needed. Our first calculation is assuming that library digital objects are of a larger size. This table shows the calculations for a 1 megabyte file and a 1 terabyte file using an NB5 checksum. 1 megabyte file is very small and doesn't have a great impact for a one-time Fixity check. However, a 1 terabyte file or a collection of files does produce a measured amount of carbon dioxide equivalent. A neat tool in the United States Environmental Protection Agency lets you translate equivalent energy consumptions, showing that Fixity on 1 terabyte of digital content is the equivalent to half a gallon of gas or 585 smart charges. This table, which is current to March 2020, summarizes a single Fixity check for each digital object on average in only the Virginia Tech Digital Library, with an approximate 33.5 terabytes of content. And using the previous energy calculation, a single Fixity for this amount of content is 88.87 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent. Using the same equivalencies calculator from the EPA website, this is equivalent to 4.2 gallons of gas or 4,571 smartphone charges. Ultimately, the environmental impact of running Fixity is very complicated. These results are based on others' research, and validating even our small investigation would be very time-intensive study in collaboration with our IT division and vendors, which we currently do not have support or bandwidth to perform. However, if our result of 86.87 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent is anywhere near accurate, this is concerning and is clear motivation for us to begin modifying our workflows. In terms of storage, Virginia Tech University Libraries has 4 levels of preservation, ranging from no preservation action taken at level 0, all the way to maintaining 2 local copies, 2 cloud copies, and ingest into either Aptres or Meta Archive. Most of our content is in the middle at level 2. Within all our storage locations, this table shows the location, medium, geographical location, purpose, and the minimum number of copies that might be maintained. We have a mix of cloud and disk storage spread throughout the United States for various purposes. The big question is that lots of copies and lots of checksums do keep stuff safe, but can we really articulate the value of these choices and still account for our carbon footprint? Our conclusion is yes, but we believe we are following the best practices for storage choices by having our local servers, AWS servers, and preservation subscriptions for strong storage diversity. We also commit to the number of copies we maintain. However, we need better and more selective appraisal, both in pre-digitization workflows and for preservation. We also need to better distribute preservation objects in our storage spaces to better optimize those spaces and decrease reliance in any one location. One other quick thing to note is that AWS has recently released a customer carbon footprint tool to track carbon emissions or time and geographic location to measure direct and indirect emissions of content in AWS. We had to figure out how to get this one access to this, and one of our system engineers at the university finally got a hold of a copy for our measurements, and this is representing January 2020 to November 2021. According to the breakdown from this tool, Virginia Tech emitted 0.6 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent, and AWS claims that we have saved 0.4 megatons by using them. S3 storage is generating the most carbon emissions. This is a new feature. We really still don't know what to do with it. We're working on understanding the actual impact of these numbers, but it's something we can continue to monitor over time as we increase activity with AWS. As with Fixity, environmental impact of digital storage choices is also very difficult to define. We have not determined what the Pendergrass article describes as acceptable loss, quote, the level of acceptable loss in a collection under our care. To make better use of what resources we do have, indicating improved and increased appraisal is necessary. Another aspect we have found interesting to note is that energy efficiency is almost always measured by financial cost rather than by environmental cost. Libraries are businesses, and energy consumption is usually conveyed in terms of money, but measuring the environmental impact would not only help to decrease that impact, but it could have a positive impact on financial costs as well. Really, though, the big takeaway here is best summarized by Bill Nye. We've got lots of problems, and they're all difficult. So our recommendations from this study. First recommendation, we have several of these recommendations are included here. First, we want to take a look at include climate considerations during the appraisal workflow of our digital collections. Long-term impact of digitizing large collections is largely unknown and needs to be considered alongside other factors in collection selection. Reducing our fixity checks. That's a conversation that's been happening more and more in the digital preservation field, and after this investigation into our university library practices, we recommend reducing fixity checks in AWS from every 90 days to possibly every 120 days as a start. To account for this, we should increase spot checking fixity from a randomly selected subset of files in each collection and increase test restorations to account for this decreased fixity checking. Determine acceptable loss. Referring back to the article again, we must determine our acceptable loss. Our IT division has similar protocols in their software, and the same should be applied to our collections. Simply reducing security will reduce energy consumption. We need to determine acceptable loss for each of our storage vendors we contract with, and alter our workflows with mechanisms for faster healing to compensate for any loss. As noted in the previous slide, we must investigate stricter preservation appraisal methods by expanding our current levels of preservation and modifying them to incorporate more direct appraisal. Also, shout out to Nathan Talman in the room for already having some resources available for preservation appraisal for us to begin working with on this component. A few more. We recommend adjusting an existing collection policy or mission to reflect a commitment to sustainably manage digital resources and guide future decision making. Decrease redundancy of working files, so streamlining the transfer process will help minimize the multi-department storage redundancy of working files. Understanding that redundancy is a necessity, we aim to determine which stages of this collection management process should be the most secure. Scheduling a process for deletion after migration and quality assurance is also key. The size of a digital object directly impacts the energy consumed in running Fixity, transferring between storage locations and ongoing storage maintenance. We recommended exploring collections or data types where there are options for creating lower resolution or otherwise smaller objects. As an organization, we recommend that Virginia Tech University libraries develop a sustainability statement for the digital libraries to scope our work and to emphasize not only the importance of it, but the immediate need for greener digital library creation strategies. The libraries are responsible for keeping up with digital trends and practices, educating the university and larger community as well. We recommend regular professional development network trainings on ensuring good practices in personal and professional archiving that also emphasize environmental sustainability. In the long term, we do want to explore the time and money expended and all these steps to really identify and reinforce areas of improvement. We also want to explore other preservation activities for energy consumption to determine what is justifiable to run more often and what should be performed sparingly. Finally, we would love to actually validate the energy consumption numbers in this investigation by collaborating with our IT division and our vendors. So thank you.
Sorry, can't quite hear you.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Alan. That was really insightful. I just had a question around, perhaps you could expand on your experience of achieving buy-in from the organisation for all this. And by that, I mean, perhaps from those who might be nervous about altering our perception of what best practice is, but also from, sort of powers that be who often look at sustainability, as you mentioned, as a financial saving, which can be quite dangerous when it's concerned with collections care. So I just wondered if you could expand on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Alex is in the chat. She may be able to talk specifically to digital preservation standards and how those are being addressed. I am in the archival realm, so I deal a lot with digitization practices and those standards. And being fairly new to university libraries at Virginia Tech, I've been there 2 years now, I could say that there is a prevalence to handle a lot of documentation internally in departments, and I think there is definitely a strong pull to industry standards in each department, the digital imaging lab in particular. I think as an organization, we need to listen to those departments and the experts and defer to them in that regard, but kind of in our charge, there's one charge in there where it says how collecting policies can be addressed for each department. I would want to put the onus on departments to find out what they're comfortable with, and then maybe have a broader conversation around sustainability and share how each department may look at what efforts they can do internally. It's hard sell to tell an archivist, that a preservation copy needs to be substandard. I have a hard time swallowing that, but this is a conversation I have in every department. What standards, and maybe they are already cutting some corners on lighting or other, things that they don't necessarily have the funds for, and why were those decisions made, and is there a better decision to be made in terms of cutting costs or adjusting their standards? I don't think there's a right answer, but maybe communicating between departments is the important thing. We haven't talked about this much in the paper, but this would kind of be in line with how things would happen at the university library. Would it be have like a sustainability task force, something like that? So how these conversations that are happening in individual departments may be communicated among the rest of the library. That would kind of be in line how these issues are usually handled at Virginia Tech, and that would probably be a good way to see what people's comfort level is without it being top down.
Sorry, I think we just had a commenting from...
Yeah, we've got a couple of things
yeah.
just to add in. Yeah, I know I can see there's questions coming in from the audience. We'll do our best to get through them. So Alex has just added her own comment online saying, we have the benefit of having a Dean, Head of IT and Director of Digital Libraries and Preservation, all with a background in DigiPres, and have indicated interest in cost and energy savings. So if we can translate greener practices as a cost saving, we believe starting with these small changes can lead to a greater impact in the upper admin.
Yeah.
So that's Alex's comment. We also have a question online, if I may ping that across, because the rest of you can always grab Alan afterwards. So Jack O'Sullivan is asking, the equivalencies are great to see, but do you know how big a percentage of the library's overall footprint the digital preservation activities are? Is tweaking what checksums you use and how often you check them just playing in the margins of the library's overall energy usage, or does it have a meaningful impact?
Yeah, we did not, for this, look at the overall energy consumption in the library. We had some tools available for that the university produces, but yeah, it's hard to say what a measurable impact of Fixity modification would be on the library-wide or the university itself.
Hi, could I just explore that point a little bit further? It occurs to me that the cost of preservation of a physical collection is very high. The maintenance of environment within storage rooms, within stacks, is one of the highest carbon footprint aspects, certainly of my own institution, and I think of others. Is there an offset to be had by being between the digitization process, which burns carbon in the context of preserving those digital copies, making them available, and once an item is digitized, perhaps in a physical environment, it can be moved to a storage environment which itself has a lower carbon footprint. I'm thinking of certain storage environments in the UK where there's a very low carbon footprint because it's stored in a mine with, several days access time. If the stuff's been digitized, you don't need to get to it, so you can put it into a lower carbon environment. It seems to me we should be looking, as you were saying there, we should be looking at the whole carbon footprint of the life cycle of our information. And I think that's an important thing to perhaps in future research.
Right. Yeah, I do like that idea. One thing we encountered a lot was the word sustainable was used about finances. So I think a lot of the work in types of physical storage is considering the financial aspect of it and not necessarily looking at the carbon footprint like we would be with digital objects. So it would be interesting to see the side by side and if similar practices or principles were put into place for physical and digital.
I'm really sorry, I can see more hands going up, and I think that just shows why it's great that we've got environment as a theme at the conference. But in the interest of time, we need to move on. So I'd ask everyone to thank Alan again, please.